Hi, it's Paul here from selfhelpforlife.com, and today I'm going to cover how to overcome OCD. Now, OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it's basically an anxiety disorder that's characterized by unwanted and repeated thoughts, feelings and images, which are known as obsessions. The person then responds by doing certain behaviours or rituals, which are known as compulsions. And after the person has done that behaviour or ritual, the obsessive thoughts, feelings and images reduce, so they feel better. The problem is they only feel better temporarily. And if they don't do that behaviour or ritual, this causes great anxiety, which is why they do it. Now, OCD can range from very mild to very severe. So someone that when they leave the house checks that the heater's off 2 or 3 times, the lights are off 2 or 3 times, maybe that the oven or cooker's off 2 or 3 times, that's quite a mild case. But if that person is checking 20 or 30 times before leaving, then that's much more severe. Same with, say, checking a tap. So checking that a tap is off 2 or 3 times is a very mild case of OCD. Checking 30, 40 or more times would be a much more serious case. Someone who washes their hands twice, that could be a mild case of OCD, where washing your hands 20, 30 or more times would be a very severe case of OCD. So it does vary. Now, what I'm going to now cover is the vicious cycle of OCD. So it starts with an obsessive thought that then generates a feeling, which is an anxiety feeling. That feeling then causes the person to do that compulsive behaviour or ritual, and they do that to relieve that anxiety feeling, and that then leads to relief. But that relief is only temporarily, because those obsessive thoughts will start to come back again fairly soon. So what causes this anxiety in the first place? Well, it's the person having a fearful, imagined negative outcome in their mind, one that they are scared of. And then they do the behaviour or ritual to prevent this imagined outcome from happening. So what they're thinking in their minds is, I'm scared of this, but if I do this, then it might not happen. So I'm now going to cover some of the types of behaviours that OCD people do. So the first one are washers/cleaners. So these are people who are afraid of contamination. So they wash their hands several times or they clean several times. The next one is checkers. These are people that are checking that things like the oven's off, that the door's locked. And their fear is that there'll be some kind of harm or danger if they don't do that, and it could be their fault. The next one is losing control. This is people who feel that they might harm themselves or others by losing control of their ability to do things or not do things. The next one is hoarders. These are people who believe that something bad will happen if they throw something away. The next one is orders and arrangers. These are people who like to have things in a certain order, and they do that to feel calm. And if things are not in that order, then they have an anxiety feeling as a result. Then there's touchers. These are people who touch something. Often it's a door or the floor or a wall, because when they do that, they believe that everything will be okay. And if they don't do that, something that they've imagined bad will happen. Now, when I work with people who suffer from OCD, there's always one principle that I always have in the back of my mind, and that is the OCD behaviour makes complete sense to the person. So if you're suffering from OCD, you'll know this already. You'll know that the behaviour that you're doing makes complete sense. However, if you have a friend or a family member that's suffering with OCD, you probably don't believe that. So the first thing really with helping anyone with OCD is to know that the behaviour makes complete sense to the person. They will be thinking, I must keep doing this, because if I don't, then something bad could happen. Now, if you're suffering from OCD yourself, these are 2 great questions to ask. The first one is, what is the bad thing that you're imagining? So take a bit of time out to work out what that is. What is the bad thing that you're imagining? And the second question is, if that bad thing did happen, how would you feel? Okay, so if that bad thing did happen, how would you feel? So I'm now going to cover a number of ways to help you overcome an OCD behaviour. So the first one is to identify and write down your triggers. So write down the thoughts or situations that bring on that OCD behaviour. So maybe it's when you're getting ready to go to work, you start to think about locking up and all the things you need to check. So that could be a thought. It's also a situation as well, because you're getting close to that actual locking up. It could be that the situation is when you go into a public toilet and you then think about the fear of being contaminated. It could be when you're switching off a tap, so that could be a situation as well, and you start to think about maybe the house being flooded if you don't turn it off properly. Okay, so they're the thoughts or the situations. So you write those down. Then the next thing you do is you rate each of those on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of intensity. And you might need to think about the feeling that comes from that to give that the appropriate intensity score. And what this will do is it will help you to anticipate those feelings or urges, that anxiety feeling. And then what you can do is you can give that task extra attention so that you remember that you've done it and later you're certain that you've done it. So the second way is to learn to resist the OCD compulsions. So what you don't want to do is try and avoid those situations. Okay, so to give you an example, let's say you're leaving the house and locking up, but you're leaving with someone else. So what you could easily do is allow the other person to lock up instead of you, so that they get to check and it's their responsibility. However, if you keep doing that regularly, that will just make it worse in the long term. So what you want to do is you want to expose yourself, keep doing those situations, but learn to resist the urge to do the OCD behavior or ritual. And this technique is known as exposure and response prevention, or ERP. And this is the main therapy that's used for OCD. So if you go and see a psychologist or a psychotherapist, this is the process that they will normally do, or they'll at least start with this one anyway. So what this involves is exposing yourself to the source of the obsession, so the situation that causes you to do the OCD behavior, but then not doing the OCD behavior. Instead, you sit and feel the anxiety feeling. So you just allow that feeling to just be in your body, just sit with it. And what you'll find over time is that anxiety feeling will begin to reduce. So it's almost like you're facing the feeling, you're almost facing the fear. And when you do that, it starts to reduce. Now, the challenge with exposure and response prevention, ERP, is that you have to do it many times before the unconscious mind picks up on it. And it's always best to start with situations that have a low anxiety, a low fear threshold. So you remember in step 1 where you identified the intensity of the different OCD behaviors. So start with ones that have a low intensity score and then work up to the ones that have a higher score. So the third way is to create a new ritual. So that old behavior or ritual has become a pattern or a habit because you've done it so many times in the past. So a great way is to create a new ritual or habit. But this new ritual has to have 3 key components to it. Firstly, it needs to get you concentrating completely on the task. Because what happens with the old ritual and habit is that you do the task, but while you're doing it, you're thinking about the fear and not the task. So then you go away and you think, oh, did I actually do that? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're checking that the tap is off. Okay, so while you're checking that the tap is off, your mind is imagining, say, the house flooding. Okay, so it's imagining that, you're getting the anxiety feeling from that, and you're not actually checking that the tap is off. So you go away, and then a few minutes later you think, well, did I really turn the tap off? So you go and check it again. Okay, so the new ritual needs to be something that you can do with complete concentration, because you want to be absolutely certain that you've done it. Okay. The new ritual also needs to be memorable in some way so that later you can remember that you've done it. And the third bit is it needs to be done for 17 seconds or more. So that's 17 seconds or more. So why 17 seconds? Well, if you think about how we go through our life, our mind thinks about one thing for 3 or 4 seconds, then it thinks about something else. And over the course of the day, we have lots of different thoughts for just 3 or 4 seconds often. So when you focus on something for 17 seconds or longer, your unconscious mind begins to realize that this is important. This is something I should pay attention to. This is something I should listen to. Okay, so that's why the 17 seconds is important. So some examples then could be holding your hand under a tap that is off for 17 seconds and focusing completely on the feeling of your hands. Another example could be holding the cooker or oven knob in the off position for 17 seconds and really noticing the feeling of your hand on that knob. Another one could be when you lock up. It could be after you're locked up, you push the door for 17 seconds and you feel your pressure and the resistance of the locking mechanism on that, and you just notice that for 17 seconds so you can be absolutely certain that the door is locked. If it's about washing hands, it could be looking at your hands after you've washed them for 17 seconds and just noticing how clean they are. Now, this new ritual is a temporary thing. It's a temporary step. So it's not designed to be something you're going to do for the rest of your life permanently. It's temporary. And it's designed to get you concentrating completely on the task and not the fear. Okay, so you can be certain you've done it and remember you've done it. And it's also about you feeling calm and in control while you're doing it, because that's important as well. When you feel calm and in control, that anxiety feeling is a lot less. What the new ritual also does is it shows that the behavior can be changed, okay? And that increases your belief that you can get rid of this OCD behavior and ritual completely. So think of the new ritual as like a step-by-step process to getting rid of the OCD behavior once and for all. So step number 4 is to focus on what you do want and turn it into a mantra. So a mantra or an affirmation is a positive statement that you repeat often. And for OCD, I suggest that the mantra contains 3 bits of information. One is a statement that you're only going to do the behavior once. Second is to include the words certain and remember. And finally, the affirmation or mantra should address the underlying fear. So here are some example mantras or affirmations to help with certain OCD behaviors. So for taps, it could be, when I turn the taps off once, I can be certain that they're off, and I'll later remember that they're off, and then I know that the house will stay dry as a result. For locking up, it could be, when I lock up once, I can be certain that I've locked up, and I'll later remember that I've locked up, so that when I return, all my belongings will be safe. For cleaning hands, it could be, when I wash my hands once, I can be certain that they're clean, and I'll later remember that they're clean, and as a result, my hands and my body are free from any contamination. Now that last one, I've actually mentioned the fear in a negative way, and that's okay with these affirmations as long as you address the fear. Where possible, I'll try and stay in the positive, but in that case, that was a bit hard to do with that hand example, so that's okay. Okay, the next way, number 5, is to separate the OCD from your sense of identity. Now, all behavior that you do stems from your sense of who you are, your sense of self, your sense of identity. And one thing to know is that the OCD is not you, it's just a behavior that you do. So the OCD is not you, it's just a behavior that you do. And the way to do this is to, instead of saying my OCD, I'm sure you've heard people say, my OCD or my anxiety, that's identifying with that, okay? So instead of saying my OCD, say that OCD or this OCD. So what you're doing is you're separating the OCD behavior from your sense of identity, and your unconscious mind will pick up on that, okay? When it hears the word that or this, it seems like just a play on words. It'll pick up on that and it will separate that OCD behavior from your sense of identity. So number 6 is to challenge any obsessive thoughts. So remember that the OCD behavior always starts with a thought that then leads to an anxiety feeling, that then causes them to do the behavior, that then results in temporary relief. Okay, so if we can deal with the thoughts, that's almost like getting to the root cause. So a key thing here is to not try and repress those obsessive thoughts. Okay, whenever you do that, they're just going to come back. So it's better to just be able to sit with them and deal with them. Okay, so it's a similar approach here to the exposure and response prevention method, the ERP method that I talked about earlier in this video. And what can also help is to write those thoughts down. And when you write them down, you'll get clarity on what those repetitive and obsessive thoughts are. They're so much clearer when you write them down than when you're in your head. And when you write them down as well, the power will start to lose. So the power of those obsessive thoughts will start to reduce. And also remember that they're just thoughts. They may be unwanted, they may be intrusive, they might be even violent thoughts, but these are just normal thoughts. And what's the key here is that it's the importance that you give those thoughts, which gives them that meaning. So if you can just begin to just let those thoughts go, begin to challenge them, ask yourself what other meanings could those thoughts have, then that will allow the power of those thoughts to reduce. So the seventh one is medication. Now interestingly, OCD responds very well to certain types of medication, and this has led some people to believe that OCD is some kind of chemical thing in your body, which is why medications work for it. That's not quite my belief. My belief is this: the medications help reduce the anxiety feeling. Okay, so the thoughts are still there, the obsessive thoughts are still there, but the feelings have been reduced. And when the feelings are reduced, the likelihood of doing the behaviour is reduced as well, because the behaviour comes from the feelings. Okay. Also, medications release serotonin, which is a feel-good drug, so it just makes you feel better as well. Okay. So medication can be useful, especially if you're working on the root causes as well, so working on the thoughts and what caused that feeling in the first place. It can help provide some relief while you're doing that. So the last one, number 8, is to go and see a hypnotherapist. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, the main approach that a psychologist or psychotherapist would use would be exposure and response prevention, the ERP approach. The one that involves you sitting with the feeling and not doing the behaviour. And that can feel quite uncomfortable, and it can take quite a few sessions and quite a lot of work between to overcome that OCD. Now, with that, it also doesn't always address the fear behind it. You remember I was saying earlier that the person is imagining something bad happening that's creating a fearful feeling or feeling scared. And it's important, or essential in my view, that that is addressed for the OCD behaviour to go away once and for all. So when someone comes and sees me for help with OCD, either at my clinic here in Sydney or online via Skype or Zoom, then there's 3 things that I specifically tend to do. One is I'll do some regression. So this is when I take someone back to when they were younger, to the source of what caused the OCD experience. So quite often there's something that happened when they were younger that caused that OCD behavior to start. So if we know what that is, we can go back to it, we can release the fears and the feelings from that, and then that allows that your mind, your unconscious mind, to have a different, to think about that differently when the behavior next happens. Okay. The second thing I do is use something called the rewind technique, or the fast phobia cure. This is great if there's something quite traumatic in the past that caused the OCD behavior. This will allow, is another great way to kind of scramble it in your mind and release the feelings as well. So that in the present, your mind thinks differently when that situation happens again. And the third thing I would help you with is to detach yourself from that OCD experience, because OCD in a way is almost like a hypnotic trance, so helping you dehypnotize yourself in a way. Now, if you'd like me to help you with OCD, go to selfhelpforlife.com/hypnotherapy and you will find more information there. Hypnotherapy can be done extremely effectively online using Skype or Zoom. And another benefit is that often I can help you at a time that's convenient for you, because during my working day here in Sydney can well be your evening or morning where you are. So you can have a session out of your normal working hours, where if you saw someone locally, you might have to take some time off to do that. Okay, so again, head over to selfhelpforlife.com/hypnotherapy to find out more about that. So if you're suffering with OCD, then I highly recommend that you start applying the information contained in this video. If you're watching this and you don't have OCD, but you know someone, a family member or a friend that does, then do share this video with them so that they can start applying this information as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, please give it a thumbs up, and do leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. And do subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and click the bell notification. That way you will always be notified whenever I release future videos. And do go and check out my website as well. That is selfhelpforlife.com. On my website you will find the written versions to many of these videos, and also a link to my podcast and social media as well. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to sharing more great content with you very soon. Bye for now.